All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. I don't know, that was kind of weak. Good afternoon, everyone. I know y'all are had your lunch and you're ready for your after lunch nap, but we're gonna get into a really great conversation. I think, we heard some really great concepts already in the opening conversation, but now we're gonna get a little bit more specific. Although the topic for our panel was kind of general, we've got a great panel up here of folks to talk about housing and economic development, and so I changed the title. And the new title is Overcoming Barriers to Affordable Housing and How to Build or Create More. So that's what we're going to talk about. It's the same topic, just more specific. And I have this amazing panel sitting up here with me, and I am not going to do long bio reads because I want us to get into the topic, but I will introduce everybody briefly and let them share a little bit about the organizations that they come from. So starting at the far end, we have Sharon Wilson Géno. She is the president of the National Multifamily Housing Council. Next to her, we have Dr. Eloisa Clementich, who is the president and CEO of Invest Atlanta, and then next to me, Tahra Hoops, who is the director of economic analysis at the Chamber of Progress, and I believe newly married.
Yes.
Congratulations. Yes, congratulations.
That's why she looks so happy.
Yes. She missed our prep call because she was on her honeymoon, I believe.
Yeah, no, I just landed from Thailand and I came straight here.
There you go. That's dedication. So I want to start by asking each of you, as I said, to just share a little bit about your organization. So Sharon, do you want to start?
Sure. The National Multifamily Housing Council is an organization of 2,000 plus companies that are owner, developer, managers, operators of housing of all varieties, everything from Class A all the way down to the most affordable. But they also include equity providers, capital providers, tech companies involved in the housing space, and a variety of others who believe we need more housing in this country.
Excellent. Eloisa?
Yes, Eloisa Clementich, don't look as happy 30 years in. I'm just kidding. Don't tell my husband that. He'll go, what? Okay, just making sure you're awake. My name is Eloisa Clementich, proud president and CEO at Invest Atlanta. We're the economic development arm for the city, but what's exciting about us is we get to do a little bit of both. So we have a whole affordable housing, community development side of the house, and then we have a whole economic development side of the house. So really it's our secret sauce, but that pretty much means if no one says, hey, we got to get this done and we don't know who can do it, where do you think it ends up? All right, tough crowd, Invest Atlanta, thank you.
And Tahra?
Hi, everyone. I am coming from the Chamber of Progress. We are a center-left tech trade policy coalition. We are looking to advance tech's progressive future, and also last year we released our cost of living agenda, which is where a lot of my work resides in. We also just started the Rebuild newsletter. We are coming to you live twice a week, where we are focusing on how Democrats can bring down the cost of living.
Thank you all, and I guess I should say too that I'm Fulton County Commissioner, and we are sitting in Fulton County right now, so welcome, and a member of New Deal, of course. So let's jump right into it and talk about the problem of the shortage of housing. And so, Sharon, I want to start with you. From your perspective, why is there such insufficient housing, and what are the biggest barriers to getting more?
The story is long, and a la our last speaker, he told a really good framework in terms of the history, but I did in fact read The Power Broker fairly recently, but I recommend it on Audible if you have a lot of laundry to fold. Still took me a month. But a lot of it is that regulatory framework that we have now, that's become embodied in many of our localities, as well as at the federal level as well. We are somewhere between 3.9 and 7 million units of housing short in this country today. Today. It's going to take, it took us a long time to get here, and a lot of it, various economic conditions and a variety of things, and it's going to take us a while to get out. So in terms of the policies that you're promoting at the local level, you got to be honest with your voters and say, hey, it took us a while to get here, it's going to take us a while to get out, but let's get on the right path. Unfortunately, we're seeing increasingly a number of jurisdictions and states as well looking at easy button solutions in an effort to gain votes. Rent control, rent stabilization strategies, limiting the ability to invest in housing, increasing the bar for getting permits and and increasing zoning and other things. Those processes cost time, they cost money, and exactly what our last speaker said, if you want housing in your community, some developers are going to look at that space and say, no, thank you, I don't want to go through it. So there are a whole variety of issues at play, but now is the time. We have people's attention. Last election, housing was the number 1, 2, or 3 issue at the national level and almost every state and local congressional race. We have a moment in time here, but a lot of that work starts with you at the local level.
All right, well, Tahra, I'm going to jump over to you because I know you're focused so much on the policy. Are there specific policies that you're targeting in terms of making changes to sort of remove some of those barriers?
Yeah, NEPA and CEQA will be the death of me. It is the National Environmental Policy Act and the California Energy and Environmental Quality Act. These were policies that were 100% well-intended. They were born out of the 60s and the 70s. It was through the progressive movement, it was through the civil movement, and it was through a post-war era where we genuinely needed these policies during this time. But as the decades went on, these policies became so bloated where you had lawmakers kind of using it as an excuse and almost a weapon to block change whenever they could. There is one quote that always stuck out to me. It was in 2023. Karen Bass mentioned how CEQA was being weaponized, and she stated how there was a liquor store that people didn't want to build. It didn't want to have any development in that neighborhood. So they used CEQA as a way to block it, not based on environmental concern, but to concern of the environmental character of the neighborhood. So quite literally the vibes and how it would deter the character of the neighborhood. So policies like that, we are really focused on the nitty-gritty of how we can start to streamline them. And it's not to deregulate in a sense to take away all regulations, but in focus that it actually has an environmental impact and we are not just blocking progress to block progress.
Yeah, absolutely. Eloisa, I know you're kind of down in the weeds of trying to help actual developers put buildings up. So talk about, and full disclosure, I sit on the Invest Atlanta board. Did I say that?
She's the best board member, by the way. Keep it real, I'm asking for a raise soon. I'm just
But I do know that we deal with projects all the time. You deal with projects all the time where developers would like to build more affordable housing, but there are economic challenges for them to be able to do that. They're in business to make money. So talk about some of those challenges.
Yeah, when I think of housing, I think of it as a spectrum. It really is from an individual that may be homeless, but it could go all the way to how many of us have kids that are graduating with a lot of debt. Okay, am I the only one? Okay, no one else? Kids? Oh, you guys are great parents to pay for all your kids' tuition. So it really becomes that spectrum of how we're providing housing for everyone and every type. What we're seeing real, in fact, I was just on a briefing call before I walked in here talking about what are some of the board items that we're bringing in 2 weeks. And we've seen 2 projects where the cost escalation of that project is up 30%. These are real. So all of a sudden we're like, woohoo, we're gonna close, we're so excited. And that was like, they came back and were like, yeah, we didn't contemplate what's happening with tariffs, we don't know, but material and labor, all the speculations, interest rates, the longer the project takes, the longer it's gonna cost. So these are real issues that we're trying to solve today. But what I can tell you is we got to get them over the line. And to your point, the longer we take, the more expensive it's gonna be. So we have to ensure that we're looking at a broad spectrum. So the last part of your question is, what incentives? So we are putting everything we have on the table, from the city council, mayor's commitment, then council member, for a housing opportunity bond, which is low-cost financing that we were able to put out there, to leveraging our tax allocation districts or TIFs to be able to fill in these gaps in creative ways.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see it in the practical terms, project by project, and sometimes it's different, and it does. And let's be honest, and we're gonna come to this because the NIMBY thing gets in the way too, practically for a lot of folks. It would be nice if everybody didn't feel that way, but many do.
Well, Commissioner, I'll just say it's not a NIMBY thing. It typically is traffic.
Oh.
That is the new code word, traffic.
Yeah, yes, that is a lot of the reason people don't want that new development for sure. I wanted to kind of breeze through the the root causes of the problems, because I wanted us to spend more time talking about solutions. So I'm going to come to you, Tahra, about this NIMBY-YIMBY thing. I know everybody's talking about moving towards the YIMBY thing, but I know in my community there are a lot of people that are not going there. They will not allow it. The zoning laws, all of the things, they do not want to have a fourplex, next door. So how do we move people into a different mindset?
So this question to me is something that I had to sit with, because when I first entered this realm, I attended college from 2016 to 2020, so I have just been a hyper-partisan world setting since the day I was born, basically. So when I first learned about NIMBY versus YIMBYs, it just seemed like common sense to me to be a YIMBY, and I realized I wasn't making my case and I wasn't sowing the seed. So I think the first step here is understanding how someone gets to be a NIMBY, and it's because they're dissatisfied with the current way that their government is implementing, from the basics to traffic laws to potholes and so forth. So when you feel that you are on a sinking ship, you don't want to give out more life vests, you want to preserve them for you and your family. So I think the first step is just making sure that local government delivers government well, and then you can start to understand, like, it's not a zero-sum ideology. It is where you can enter a positive sum, because zero-sum ideologies fuels reactionary politics. It's how J.D. Vance was able to honestly win his VP debate, where he mentioned how immigrants were stealing homes from you. And when you are trying to just make ends meet and you're worried about your children, you're like, should we be building more? Should we be letting people in here? So it's why one of the first steps is to build more housing, making sure your traffic lights work, making sure your kids feel safe to walk to school. And once you begin to feel a sense of comfortability, then people will slowly start to realize, like, you can build community and still feel safe and comfortable, that no one will take away your belongings.
Yeah, I think it's a real challenge because, to your point, Eloisa, and your point, I think at the end of the day, those things also cost a lot of money. So you're talking about not just putting up the development and putting those housing units in, but what is the cost from an infrastructure perspective? What do you do about the roads? If there's not high-speed rail, how do people get around? What about those traffic lights? And what about the environmental concerns and all of those things? And so for all of us who are in local government, we certainly know that getting any more money out of the budgets we already have is extremely trying. And some of those infrastructure things are just not sexy. So taxpayers don't understand and they don't want to pay for them. So it's forever challenging, I think. And I think we're going to get to this later, but we need to do a better job making the asks and explaining all of this, but also keeping it simple. So tough.
Can I just add on to, I was just going to say, I think it also has been, what I found most effective is putting the person, right? Like sometimes when you talk about affordable, everybody goes quickly to someone who's homeless. And I always try to remind, well, the incoming teacher is earning about $40,000 to $50,000 a year. Where are they going to live? And if they're having to drive 20 miles or 15 miles to get to school, how accessible will they be to do after school, whatever, sports, tutoring, what? So I do think once we were able to clearly say and put the person, it's your neighbor, it's your barista, it's your dry cleaner, it is, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh yeah, I really do like Mark, he's such a nice guy, I should support him. It really helped to change the conversation if it's all someone that you know in your mind that would benefit from such a program.
And that's basically what I was going to say as well. We have so many dividing lines now, racial lines, religious lines, age lines, income lines. Let's not make what we all want our communities together to be another line. And just what you're saying, I've seen a lot of success happen when we not only talk about your neighbor or your barista, talk about your children, talk about your grandchildren. This is not an overnight success. There is no one easy button that any politician at any level of government can just say, hey, if we just pass this, your housing woes will go away. This is a long-term project. And if you want your children and your grandchildren to be able to be participants in your community, it's important that we do some hard things on the front end in order to make the world a better place for them.
Yeah, I think, you mentioned, Eloisa, paying for kids' college debt. I mean, I will throw out there that, my daughter and her husband, who are in their early 30s, can't afford to buy a house, and they both have master's degrees, and they've been working full-time since they got out of college. And so, this is adding to the lack of housing. Atlanta used to be the place to go if you wanted to be able to buy a house young. I think I was able to buy my first house with my husband when I was 24.
Oh my God.
And that's Atlanta, or it was, but not anymore. Now in that very same place, my daughter and son-in-law can't do it, and it doesn't look like it's anytime soon, right? So this is all affecting people with even lower incomes than them as well. So, because they're not moving out of the apartments, right? So,
They're not moving out of our homes.
they are
Can I
not
say
moving
that
out,
on-
right? They are one step
My
away
daughter
from
moved in yesterday morning in my basement apartment.
Well, let's talk about building affordable housing goals into economic development. Eloise, I want to bring that to you because I know it's something that Invest Atlanta has done very well, but a lot of development authorities around the country are not doing that yet or have not done that. So talk a little bit about that model and how that works.
Yeah, so when we go after companies to try to attract them to Atlanta, we put this housing as part of our package of incentives that we can offer. Because what we're hearing is, before it was, oh, Eloisa, we all wanted, if you're familiar with Atlanta, like the head of the snowman, so it's head of Buckhead, Midtown, and downtown. Just think of a snowman here. So they used to all say, oh, we want to go up to Buckhead. Now we're seeing Midtown. And I predict in about 5 years, we'll see more pressure or more opportunities within downtown. But what we saw was, if you ask those that we actually won, which we win a lot, go Atlanta, forget it. What we do is we ask, okay, what made you decide to come to Atlanta? And the number one thing is workforce. That really they're looking for is who has the best qualified workforce, because they want to hire people. But workers need a place to live. And so what we do is now we're very purposeful and asking, where in the spectrum are the type of employees that you're hiring? And let me tell you, if you're hiring think about the secretary or the incoming manager or project manager, their salaries are probably going to be about $60,000, $70,000-ish, and they're going to need some help in housing. So we'll specifically put some programs to help stimulate their employees to be able to not only come and get your job here, but also be able to live and be able part of the community. So being real strategic on how we have grown our incentive tools that we're going to offer.
Yeah, and of course also when people are coming and wanting to build multifamily and they want some of the tax incentives to sort of build also into that model that, yes, okay, but you need to do some at an affordable level as well.
Yeah, every single project that we invest in, if we're going to put in anything in the capital stack, we're going to require affordable housing. So we're averaging about 20% affordable housing anywhere for the life of the bond or the life of the incentive. So you'll see, depending on the tool we use, anywhere between 50 to 30 years, about 60% or 80% AMI is the level that we're going to look for that time period of affordable housing. And we always like to use Trust But Verify. We actually have a compliance team that will then come back in every year and just say, hey, how's it going? Very friendly, nice notice. But we just want to make sure.
We talked, or in the first session, they talked about in the first conversation about sort of these powerful authorities. Development authorities are that way in many ways. And as I said, I think a lot of them are not yet doing some of the things that Invest Atlanta is doing. So what would you sort of say to our leaders here to take back to their towns and states about how to sort of get development authorities to embrace some of these ideas?
Everyone's development authority is a little different. I think we're really lucky in Atlanta that we have both sides of the house. And this was really important. I remember I was in a community meeting on the west side, if you're familiar, over there by the stadium, and I had one person raise their hand, and they were like, Eloisa, we don't live compartmentalized lives. Don't give me a compartmentalized solution. And that truly has been my aha moment for the last 20 so years. I'm very young. Doing economic development is I don't have to do everything myself, but how do we lead, follow, and support, and really look at a person holistically? And I think that's the opportunity that we have Invest, is that we're going to be able to pull in the housing side, we could pull in your commercial districts, and then we're going to do your small business development. Because if it's about creating wealth at the end of the day, you have to provide all of those opportunities to an individual.
Thank you. Sharon, I want to come over to you. to talk specifically about what NMHC is doing in terms of encouraging investment. You already sort of mentioned that we need to encourage it, but how do we encourage it?
Sure. I mean, I think there are a number of different solutions. There are a number of different places to look, too. I think there's really three prongs of the stool. The state of Florida passed a law in 2023 called the Live Local Act, and it hit all three parts of the stool. One, it required the states and localities lower barriers to housing production, including by right zoning in certain locations, shorter permitting timeframes, and ensuring that there was opportunity for multifamily housing to be built in communities across Florida. There's been a little pushback on that. They're still working on it, but definitely a really important level for predictability. Two, to your point, they put their money where their mouth is. They put almost $1 billion of new investment, largely in affordable. But keep in mind, if you look at the data on this, there's a lot of science behind housing. We're not just all guessing at solutions. There is good data and research, and we can be a real resource for you and are happy to do that through our partnership with New Deal. Every unit is a good unit. So having different kinds of incentives to incentivize workforce units, deeply affordable units, units that are available for teachers and others, having different kinds of incentives is a critical part, and Live Local had part of that too. And the third part is they removed some unpredictability from investors by closing the door on rent control and rent regulation in the state of Florida. Now that sounds anti-progressive small p, it sounds like, oh, we're hurting people. The data on rent control and rent regulation is damning. There are 40 plus years that show it just doesn't work. And in fact, it disincentivizes people to come in and build the housing that we need. And in the end, who does it support? The data is very clear on this too. It largely supports upper middle income white people staying in place, effectively boxing out people that are in desperate need of housing, the teachers, the baristas, and others. So sometimes we hit those easy button solutions that our constituents think make a lot of sense, but in fact, they're hurting them now and they're gonna hurt them in the future. So a multi-pronged approach is what we're proposing. The other thing that our former speaker said that I think is also important for us to think about big picture long term is this is a three-dimensional chess game. The federal government plays a significant role in housing in that they provide a lot of resources and have some regulatory frameworks. But the states and localities also play a significant role. Well, one of the proposals that we're putting forward in Congress this session is let's use the things that work at the state and local level. Tax abatement is a program that works very well for developers to bring them in. It's fairly predictable. People know how it works. Could the federal government be a player, and could they provide a match, a local match, easy peasy, not a whole new federal program, that would match some of that local money that's going into the tax abatement, if the locality also agreed to lower barriers to housing. So those are the kinds of things we're thinking about. How can we help the localities create structures that will incentivize more development in their communities, but at the same time make the federal government not a player and a participant and a partner, and not pushing against the work that's already being done.
That was a lot. I feel like everybody's going to want more information on all of that in particular. A lot of what we're saying here, but that in particular, there was some really interesting, I'm like, how do I do that? I think we have to talk at least a little bit about what is currently happening at the federal level, because to your point, there is a lot of federal funding and federal programs that do help with some of these things. And right now, there's, if nothing else, there's certainly uncertainty. You mentioned that already, Eloisa. And, you know, I just have to ask, when you're thinking about Invest Atlanta for the next year to 2 to 3, what are the concerns, and how are you sort of getting ready for potential loss of funding and what's already happening?
Well, I went to the closet and took out my crystal ball, so I have full clarity. All right, made you.
They don't let
smile.
TSA. The TSA doesn't let you bring them, so I don't have one.
Yeah. So I think that's the whole point. Is I just don't know, right? Because and I just sometimes feel like we're being. All these big issues are put up, like, is it really tariffs? And then am I focused on the tariff, and did I miss something else? So I'm constantly trying to skim through to see what else is out there. But we're just very concerned about the continuum of care, homeless funding is on the line, or we hear, you may know better than I do, that maybe they call you, no. Anyways, we don't know.
It's early in the game.
Ah.
It's early in the game.
But that's what we're watching. What are we doing for senior housing? That one seems to be a little more safe that we're watching. And I think just in terms of just housing on that side, but also what we're doing with tax incentives, where the corporate income tax is going to land, that's going to be important to us because would there be a need to even buy these tax credits? Then think of historic tax credits, new market tax credits, all of these tools that I use every day. If no one wants to buy a tax credit, they may not have to kill that program. So those are things that we're thinking about because those are all the tools I use every single day to fund. But what is clear to us is that we're also focused on what do we have control over, and so really trying to ensure that we leverage the current tools we have. One of those being for us, it's our tax increment financing that I just want to thank both county and APS and the city for allowing us that tool because that tool now has become even more important because that is the one we have control over. So really trying to, again, I'm sure I didn't answer the question, but I honestly don't know yet the impacts.
Well, I mean, we're doing the best we can on that front, all of us trying to guess across all of the issues that we deal with, not just housing and economic development, certainly, but there's also the cost to build. I mean, the supply chain costs, with tariffs are at risk, certainly. Tahra, I want to come over to you and get your take on the federal level sort of uncertainty.
When it comes to mitigating uncertainty at this level, I think you have to go back to the basics. When I look back at the Biden administration and the people's response to it, it's honestly, people felt a little infantilized. It was clear that there was concern over high prices, housing, but we weren't really hearing from leadership that often. And when we were hearing from them, they were almost just saying, it's fine, calm down, it's okay. But there's no spreadsheet in the world that could talk to anyone's lived experience. No one is ever going to feel okay if they're saying, I can't afford rent, but you're pointing to GDP numbers saying we're doing fine and amazing. So I think when it comes to uncertainty, it really helps when we have a sharp messaging tactic because we are obviously facing, as we mentioned before, unprecedented times. I have been saying that since 18 years old because I have been constantly voting against this man since that time. And that is why Democrats more than ever need focus. Cost of living will always remain to be a #1 issue for Americans. When they go to the grocery store and they see prices start to rise, they start to get angry. In the previous administration, they focused on jobs, which is always something we should have a key priority on. But when people have good jobs, they attribute that to their own experience. But when the people have high prices, they blame the government. They blame their local leaders, and they blame the fact that no one was there to talk them through it. So I urge everyone, and I believe everyone here is already doing a great job at doing so, but communicate constantly all the time on all platforms. This means being online as much as possible. Get uncomfortable, but be authentic to yourself when you do it. You often see some cringe appearances with some senators trying to do some TikTok dances, and those don't really play out well for the Zoomers, I can say. But it does play out well when you talk to us one-on-one. It does play out well when you have town halls across the countries, even in counties that you don't represent in, because it shows that you care, and that's the #1 thing that people are asking for.
I think we're going to go to some Q&A, but I do want to say, as we're kind of finishing up the panel discussion, first of all, thank you to you all. Let's give them a round of applause. I also want to just challenge everyone to be thinking about, there's a lot of good work happening, right? But how do we simplify the message about this good work and really make it, easily understood by the masses, that we are building, that we, are looking to house everyone, right? So how do we simplify that? And I don't have the answer, it's just food for thought. Do we have questions?
Hey, I'm Lee Harris. I'm from Memphis. I'm the mayor of Shelby County. And I heard that the problem is increasing rents. I heard that we don't want to regulate the rent structure and so forth. And the only thing on the table is building more houses or building more affordable housing units and so forth. And I guess my question is, have we seen that reduce rents?
Yes.
So in Atlanta or California, are rents stabilized?
There's great data on this. In fact, I'll commend to you looking at what's been going on in Minneapolis. Mayor Fry has pushed back on some forces within his own political structure that wanted to implement a rent control regime. He had his city do a very thorough analysis of where the problem was in their city, and it was two issues. One, build more housing, and two, actually rent burden, which is the amount of somebody pays in rent, is the lowest it's ever been, and this is a national number as well, but it plays out well in Minneapolis. It's about 21 or 22% of income at the highest level of income renters. It's about 24, 25 at the middle income of renters, and it's the complete reverse at the lower end. So the problem with rent increases, wages are keeping pace with the cost of housing, and there's a lot of reasons why the cost of housing, particularly rental housing, is not very controllable in some cases by the owners. State and local taxes are a pass-through, and those have gone up, as many of you well know, to keep pace with, rightfully so, paying police and firemen and others. The cost of insurance nationally has gone up dramatically since the pandemic. So there's a number of things that are not controllable in that cost of rent. But the two reasons the city came up with is one, build more housing, and two, let's create effectively a guaranteed minimum income program for the people that actually need it, and let's target the resources and put money where it belongs to make sure the people that are falling behind so far on that wage curve can keep pace with what's happening in the market.
Thank you. As a follow-up to that, my name is Dorcia Pleers. I'm the Chief City Auditor in the City of Albany, and that's Albany, New York. But I heard the comments about the data that speaks to rent control, inclusionary zoning, and how that could be problematic potentially. But I think about, for example, a very diverse state like New York, where you have New York City, and then the rest of the state, where we know rent control was needed. The cost of living in New York City is ridiculous. And when you talk about income being comparable across the board, we know that there are huge disparities. So I'm listening with an open mind, but also listening with context from my experience being in New York. And so I just wanted to get your thoughts about that. Are you saying these are across the board problematic because of the data, or are we talking about you have to be conscious of where you are? And then the other question, there was a comment about sharp messaging when it comes to communicating with constituencies, and we've been hearing that, and one of the reasons, you know, we lost the election, messaging. Can you give an example about, or an example of the sharp messaging that you're talking about? Because I think that even with where we are today, there seems to be a very abstract conversation about what it means to sharply communicate and message, and I just want to have a clear understanding of some examples.
I'm happy to take the rent control question. The problem with that, it's a one-size-fits-all solution. So again, New York City is a great example. The people that benefit from that effectively subsidy are largely upper middle income white people, and it does not effectively help communities of color, minority communities who want to get into New York City and have a hard time paying the rent. And two, it has a long-term impact on the buildings in New York City. There is a huge problem going on right now with buildings, rental buildings under the rent control regime in New York City effectively crumbling and cannot be habitable because there isn't enough resources under the rent control regime to keep the buildings up. The Signature Bank failure in New York was effectively a failure of the rent-controlled portfolio in New York City that Signature Bank held. So there's this looming crisis that doesn't happen right away, but it happens years later when those buildings can't be preserved because there isn't enough resource there to preserve them. So I'm happy to take that question. Much longer conversation.
I'm just going to add on the inclusionary zoning because we didn't include that. My opinion may differ just a little bit. but you're sitting right here and right next to the Beltline. So the Beltline is a 22-mile loop that's just right here. And what we've seen is this Beltline has really become Atlanta's new beachfront property, in the sense that we are seeing real estate prices escalate even higher than our most expensive market at one time, which was Buckhead. And so what the city council did is they put an inclusionary zoning around the Beltline, in the Beltline and around it. It's only been in operation probably about, 5-7 years. So we'll be able to take a look back and start to see how effective it was. But I will tell you that if it wasn't for, I think, the inclusionary zoning, we would not have the affordable housing that we do along the Beltline. And then seeing other parts of the city that do not have it, and all of their complexes are going up with no affordable. So I'm not quite sure where the story will end up, but for us, at least, it's been very effective. And for the Beltline, we have an exact goal of 5,600 affordable housing units. It's really helped us get to that unit count.
And inclusionary zoning structures can work. It just depends on how they're structured, with what kind of flexibility and what kind of income levels. But we are so short of units. Every unit that's built is a good unit, and there's good data showing that those units, as even more market rate units build, those funnel down to other people and create opportunities for others as well.
Tahra, you want to take the messaging?
Happy to take this one because I'm originally from Queens, so I can speak about messaging for New York an hour long. But when it comes to the federal level, I'll start that off. When I think back to the election, AOC was the first one to call this out, I think literally the day after. There was this one ad that I'm sure you guys all heard, Kamala is for they, them, Trump is for you. That ad played everywhere, and it resonated with millions of voters. The fact that people did not believe that the current incumbent president was not working for them, for you, felt like they could not trust the people in charge. And due to Harris's, I do believe, her inability to distance herself from the previous administration led to a lot of fault on the federal level. So I do hope and encourage for future leaders running at 28, focus on making sure that government will work for you. When it comes specifically to New York, we also have an upcoming mayoral election. We have several candidates that have come to surprise me. There is one who, I might not agree with him on all policies, but Zofran is doing great on the digital media side. He had this one thing called halal inflation, which I thought was just hilarious. And it is so specific and unique to New York, and it shows that it's authentic to who he is. When you make a joke like that, you have to actually make sure it is relatable to you and relatable to your constituents. But also, you have to realize with New Yorkers, they are used to tourists coming in, and they're kind of the biggest NIMBYs of all. They feel overcrowded, the rent is too high. They want to make sure that the person that is running for them is a true New Yorker, and that means going to door and being in their face constantly. My former mentors will hate me for telling this story, but my first internship ever, I was working for a congressman who was an incumbent Democrat. I thought it was going to be an easy one and a great thing on my resume. Towards the end, I kept hearing about this other person in the primary who I just never heard before, but I saw her everywhere going door to door, and that was AOC. She went from a nobody that no one ever heard of, but because she got out there, knocked on every single person's door in that district, introduced herself, everyone knew her name by the end of it, and they blew him out of the water. And this is coming from someone who worked on the opposite side, and I can come to the conclusion that that is what people want.
Yeah, and I'll just add on the messaging side, it is really complicated to take all the things that we're talking about that are so detailed and boiling that down. And I think we have to have, and again, I don't have the total answer here, but I think we have to get it down to things that are as simple as we are building for you. Like, we are building homes for you. And then we can work out all the details behind the scenes on how we do that, and we can certainly dig into that and have policy papers and all of those things. But we have to just be leading with these really simplistic messages about the future that we are putting together.
We create communities where people build lives, and that's what rental housing is.
Yeah. I think we are out of time. So thank you all. Thank you, panelists.